Hope everybody's having a great Sunday afternoon. That's right, it is Sunday afternoon here in Durham, North Carolina. As y'all can tell, today I'm coming from the Hayti Heritage Center, where later on this evening we'll be having a symphony performance. That's right, the symphony will be performing here, our Durham Symphony. Definitely looking forward to that conversation and looking forward to that performance that will be coming our way later on this afternoon. So it should be a fun and amazing concert, and I know a lot of people will be looking forward to it. I know that the weather here is definitely lovely. It was a little bit on the cool side, like maybe around 50 degrees with a cool breeze on yesterday evening and all along those ways. But right now it's probably about 70 or something like that. And it'll probably be definitely getting in the warm temperatures later on. As a matter of fact, since I've got the manager of the computer, I can tell you exactly the temperature. And I was guessing quite right. It is 69 degrees or 68, depending on which one you want to listen to, and all in that space. And I think it's supposed to get up maybe to a low 70s and all in that space. And we're supposed to be here in the high 60s, the low 70s, and maybe even some low 60s. And then we'll be in the 50s and the 40s in the evening time. So definitely some lovely spring-like weather. I've seen people getting out and about to church services. As a matter of fact, there is a church that meets here on Sundays. They meet actually up in one of the classroom spaces. So I do know folks will be coming in and out going to that service. It's a small congregation, but they definitely get their service on and all along those lines. So it should be a fun activity of stuff going on here in Durham with this particular facility. But definitely looking forward to amazing guests coming at us from all over the world. And I've got the pleasure of talking to Sarah McQuaid. So I'm looking forward to talking to Sarah and seeing how she's doing. She's in another part of the world. And yes, we will play some of her music later on as well. So I do know that Sarah is definitely a musical person. I've had the pleasure of getting in touch with her through the wonders of the internet. The internet is a wonderful thing. You get to find all kinds of talented people, and you can reach out to them and see if they are interested in sharing some of their journey with other folks as well. So Sarah is definitely over there in other parts of the world. So Sarah, if you'll tell folks a little bit about you, because I do know that you're in the folk music space, and I actually had a folk musician that recorded, I want to say it was maybe about 2 years ago here at the Hayti Center, because they were part of, I think, Duke performances, and they were of the Irish background. So they performed here, and I'm trying to remember the young lady's name, and it's not coming to me, but definitely they have had performers from around the globe that have performed here, because even Angelique Kidjo has performed at the Hayti Heritage Center, and definitely even Branford Marcellus has recorded several of his albums here as well. So it is a church. It was an old converted church. The church has since moved on to another location many decades ago and all along those lines, but it is now a performance space. So definitely that is one of the things that goes on, even though for several years there was a fully occupied congregation that was meeting here as well, and that was Christ Central that had a tenure here for about 3 or 4 years, and there have been some other churches that have had tenures here too, and then different things happened, whether that was contracts or whether that was COVID and other things. And like I said, it is a couple of smaller congregations, one that meets once every 2 or 3 weeks, and the one that meets on a weekly basis, because of course they are trying to get their footing as they are building their congregation up. But I see that you've done some work in some churches as well as some historic cathedrals. So definitely, I might even play one of those later on, because I did see that you had one where you performed at the Derby Cathedral. So, and that was an official music video and all in that space. So definitely, Sarah, if you just share with our audience a little bit about yourself, and definitely, I'm looking forward to learning more about you as well.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's really lovely to chat to you. Yeah, I actually recorded my new album in a church, in St. Buryan Church, not in Derby Cathedral. There is a song on the album called "In Derby Cathedral," which I wrote when I was in Derby Cathedral. But the actual album and the video that you saw was recorded live in St. Buryan Church. We went in. It was during lockdown, during COVID, and I know my local church is a beautiful space for music, because I sing in the church choir. I was singing in the church choir just this morning, actually, which is something I always love doing when I'm not out on tour. But so I knew it was a beautiful place to sing. And when we were all still in lockdown, but we had got to a point where you were allowed to have 6 people in a space working together. So I went into this beautiful old church with my manager, who's also my sound engineer and whose idea the whole album was, and with a film crew and a small film crew, just a two-person film crew. And we I'd been wanting for a long time to do a live recording because I think there's something that comes out when you're actually performing live that it's very hard to replicate when you go into a recording studio and you have all the time in the world to do fixes and overdubs and everything like that, and you're kind of there's a whole different feeling. Whereas the thing I love most about music, and which has been so wonderful to be able to do again over the past year, I'll never take it for granted again, is actually going out and performing to live audiences. And but I think then, even if I couldn't have a live audience, I felt like if I was actually performing, even just with a small group of people in the space with me, that I would maybe be able to sort of, I don't know, get up to that kind of magical feeling that you have when you're performing live. And I feel like it really did work. We basically we gave ourselves the luxury of being able to stop between songs and fix camera angles and change batteries and things like that. But essentially, I did do the same thing I would do performing a live concert. And so you can actually, and the film crew filmed the whole thing while we were recording it, and you can actually watch the entire album on YouTube if you want, without going and buying it. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube, each track by track. I've got a playlist on my YouTube channel that has all of the tracks in order as they are on the album, and
Sounds
it's really
great.
lovely to be able to do.
Yeah, no doubt. I know that one of the things that I noticed is that you were born there in Spain to a Spanish father and an American mother, but you grew up here in the US and then lived in Ireland for many years and lately have been residing there in England. So I was just wondering, at one point in your life, did you realize that you had the gift for song and that you were what some people would call a songbird and all in that space? So at what point did you recognize your gift, or were you one of those folks that was practically singing as you were coming out of the womb?
Well, but because my mother sang and played guitar and piano, I have to say my earliest memories are all associated with music. And as far as I'm aware, I was singing about the same time I was talking, and because I mean, there's actually a song that I wrote on that's on the new St. Buryan Sessions album called Last Song, where I'm talking about when I was little and I used to lie in bed and listen to my mother playing her guitar in the next room, and I'd call out requests, and she'd say, "Oh, are you still awake? You should be asleep." "Oh, all right, I'll play that one then." And and then I joined the Chicago Children's Choir, which was really important for me when I think I was 7 years old when I joined just the first kind of stage of the choir, and and I stayed in the choir until we left Chicago when I was which we did when I was 14. But performing with the choir and touring with the choir was really, really, really important for my musical development. It taught me so much. Well, it was through singing with the choir that I learned how to use my voice most effectively, and learned how to read music. I'm not sure I could. Well, I think I started learning to read music when I was sort of 3 or 4, but it was really, with the choir, you really had to be able to read music, and it was a really intensive rehearsal schedule. We rehearsed twice a week, and then later on, when I became a soloist with the choir, I had an extra rehearsal for voice training, so it was 3 times a week rehearsals, and then we'd go off on tour. In fact, I remember during one of the choir tours, I remember performing somewhere in Durham, North Carolina. I can't remember what the venue was, but I distinctly remember it being thinking about Durham, and seeing it on the tour itinerary. And those were intense, because we do like a couple of school concerts during the day, and then we might have a local TV taping in the afternoon, and then there'd be a concert in the evening, and then we'd be parceled out to host families, usually organized through local churches, which was really, really lovely. And it's kind of sad, I'm still in touch with people who work with the choir, and they're not allowed to use host families anymore. The kids all have to stay in hotels, which I think is really sad, because one of the greatest things would be you'd go and stay with a different family every night and get to know them, and they'd ask you all sorts of questions about the choir and stuff, and make you a packed lunch for the morning, and you'd go off with your packed lunch, and you'd all be comparing packed lunches on the bus. Oh, look what I got. Oh, I didn't get an apple. You got an apple. Here, I'll share mine with you. It was lovely. It was really lovely.
Yeah, it sounds like it was really lovely. One of the things I noticed on your page is that there seems to be some tremendous support from some of the London-based government agencies for the arts and everything. I know definitely you haven't been a past member of the Carolina Theater and on the board for them for 2 terms, so about 5 or 6 years or something along those lines, and definitely having worked with the Carolina Theater, the Hayti Heritage Center, and the Durham Arts Council, I know the importance of getting support from arts organizations. So I was just wondering, how has that support been there in London, and was there a lot of support that was given to the artists even during these troubled times that we were in with the pandemic? And I know a lot of folks are starting to get out, even though we're seeing a lot of hybrid performances, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about those. But definitely, I was wondering, how has the support of the arts been from the Commonwealth?
It was good. It could have been even better, but I certainly could not have got through the whole COVID thing without the help that I got from the Arts Council of England. They were really generous with grants to musicians. I mean, what they could do was kind of limited. Irish musicians, I have a lot of friends who are still in Ireland, and because the Irish government has always been really wonderfully supportive of music and musicians, and in fact, your creative work, any kind of creative work, whether it's songwriting or writing books or whatever, is tax exempt in Ireland, which is fantastic. And for during COVID, they just did a kind of a basic income scheme where every musician who had been a full-time musician got X amount per week, and that was so successful that they're actually trialing that now as a kind of a universal basic income scheme, for artists and creatives, which is fantastic, so that people can, it's just a small income. It's kind of what you'd get if you were, on social welfare, but it's still, it's enough that there's something coming in, which is why so many musicians have, including myself, are on Patreon now. I don't know if you're aware of that scheme where people donate, and it's kind of wonderful, because again, even if it's just a minimal amount, what is coming in, that's coming in, and even if your concerts aren't well attended and you wind up losing money on them, you can still dare to go out and tour and do the concerts and risk losing money on them, because that basic level of support is going to be there. But yeah, the Arts Council of England did support me. So did an organization called Cultivator, which got money from the European Union, because thankfully the UK was still a part of the European Union at that point, so we were able to get that support. Sadly, that's no longer the case. Don't get me started. but yeah, no, I have been very, very fortunate with the support that I've had, both from arts organizations and from individuals.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds like you got some great support in that space. I've got a friend who is a funk musician, and a number of other friends that are in various music styles, everything from funk to jazz to blues to R&B to gospel to a number of other styles. And I know one of the things that they oftentimes talk about in various conversations that I have with them is the way that music, there's an old saying, music soothes the beast, or soothes the mind of a beast, or something like that. I forget the exact quote. Right. Yeah, that quote and everything. But that being said, I was wondering, with this pandemic and also with all the things that are going on in the world, it does seem that music is one of the great unifiers. That's what one of my friends has noticed, that when you go to a concert, you don't care whether a person is left or right of the political ventures. You don't care what their sexuality is. You don't really care any of their religious beliefs. You're just there to enjoy the music, and that is oftentimes a common part of music. But I was just wondering if you could speak to how music plays a role in that in your life, and how you find music to be a unifying factor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Mark. You're absolutely right, and it is wonderfully unifying, and it brings people together, especially now that we're able to go out to live concerts again. And I know a lot of people are very hesitant still, understandably, about going out, in groups and going out in public. And I think a lot of people actually just got out of the habit of going out to hear live music, and kind of, there's so much they have at home. They've got their Netflix and everything like that. But I really think that it's important, and I think we all take, every precaution that we can, but I think it's really important to go out and go into these spaces with other human beings and share that experience of music with them, because there's nothing else like it. And it is not something, I don't think, you alluded to, streaming and so on. And I don't think it's something you can replicate watching music on a screen. It's just not the same. It's the shared experience. I think it's the same kind of thing that you get when you go to church, that shared experience. I'm full of the thoughts of that because of where I was this morning. But I really believe that you have to be in a space with other people and share that experience with them. And I think that's what gives you that kind of greater understanding of other people and that openness to other people's point of views. And I worry that if we all just go and shut ourselves away with our little social media and our Netflix and and the rest of it, that we'll lose that, and that we'll lose that openness to other people and other views and other cultures and other religions, and you know uh, all of that. We'll lose that if we don't go out and share experiences with other people and with strangers, with total strangers, because that's the thing. You can find yourself sitting in a concert next to a total stranger and they're loving it, and you have that, you're connected with them, even though you might not even speak to them, but you've got that connectedness with them because you're sharing their experience.
No, definitely, no doubt about that and everything. How important do you think, because you alluded to it a couple of times, and of course, I'm here at the center, which used to be a converted church, but how important is the faith walk to you? Because, like I said, I don't consider myself overly religious, but I definitely consider myself spiritual, and definitely know that there is a higher power than us here on earth. And I definitely try to stay in tune with what nature is telling me, and definitely try to pay attention to signals, whether that's from dreams or from other things in life. So, like I said, I consider myself more spiritual than religious. Probably could do more attendance of churches and definitely more reading of the holy books, and not just the Bible, but several of them that are out there. But definitely try to have my own methods of meditation and conversing with the Most High, and all in that way. But I just wondered, how important has faith been in your own walking in your own creative journey?
Well, I was brought up in the Unitarian Church, and we were taught to believe, which I still believe, even though, well, there is no Unitarian Church locally here where I live in England. It's just a small village, so I go to the local church. There's just one. It's the Church of England. It's but in the unit, as a Unitarian, you're taught that all religions are basically seeking after the same thing, including people who define themselves as pagan or Wiccan, or Christians, Muslims, Jews. We're all seeking after the same thing, and there is, we're all, and even people who maybe wouldn't call themselves religious at all, and who would say, oh well, I'm a humanist, who don't necessarily think that there's a higher power. Well, they probably do believe in some kind of spirit, some kind of inner light that we all have, and these are all just different ways, I think, of looking at the same thing, whether you call it God or an inner light or a higher power or, whatever. There's something, again, it's that thing that kind of draws us all together and unites us, and it's an important thing. And for me, I find, well, especially singing in choirs, I think I've always sung both in, I mean, at the moment I sing in a local community choir as well as in my church choir. And so that thing of singing with other people, I really think there's a saying, it's a wonderful saying, he who sings prays twice, which I think is true. I think singing it's, for me, it is almost a form of prayer, even if I don't call it that, or if other people don't necessarily see it as that. But there is something spiritual about singing and singing with other people, and because it does give us that sense of connectedness that I keep harping back to.
No doubt about that. One of the other things I love about musicians, and particularly folk musicians, I am a fan of various folk musicians, everybody from folks like Bob Dylan to Gil Scott Heron to a number of other folks, even Richie Havens, that might be considered in that folk space,
Yeah.
is that it is quite often what people would term message music. And I think that there can be message music in other idioms as well, because I do know that there are message songs in hip hop. There are definitely message songs in some rock songs, and there are definitely messages in a number of other musical styles and everything. But one of the things that I love about folk music is that it is unapologetic about using its voices to bring around issues and all in that space. And I do know that there are touching subjects that are dealt with, whether that is around climate, whether that is around mental health, or whether that is around a number of other things. And I did see that one of the projects that you had worked with under a different name dealt with something that I know has been very pertinent here in the United States and even pertinent around the world, which is the folks that are feeling so pressured that they think that they might want to take themselves out of this planet as we like to live in and everything. And there's a song that you dealt with that talks about that and deals with the whole topic of suicide. So how important do you think it is for musicians to deal with social issues and to bring light to those social issues?
It is important. I'm trying to figure out which song you're talking about. I'm trying to think, what song do I have that involves suicide? But
it was actually one with one of your business partners. It was one that Tim put out that was dealing with suicide songs.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. No, that's just another project that Tim worked on. Sorry, I wasn't involved with that, but yeah, yeah, you had me worried there. I was thinking, oh gosh, if I, but yeah, no, but although the project that I did work on with Tim Norman was a song that for me has a strong environmental message. And it's interesting, it's a song that it's called, the song is called, well, the song that I wrote was called If We Dig Any Deeper It Could Get Dangerous. It's actually the title track of one of my albums. The last album that I made before the St. Buryan sessions is called If We Dig Any Deeper It Could Get Dangerous, which is just something that I heard myself saying to my son when he was digging a big hole in the back garden, and I suddenly realized he was way down over his head in this huge hole that he was digging. He was just going at it, and I said, Eli, if you dig any deeper, it could get dangerous. And just as soon as the words left my mouth, it struck me that that's there's kind of there's a lot of shades of meaning under that, because you could look at it in terms of what we're doing to the planet, with fracking and everything like that, and strip mining, and you could also look at it in terms of just interpersonal relationships. Sometimes when you're talking to somebody, you have to just stop digging, metaphorically. But yeah, you mentioned Richie Havens. I actually was so fortunate because I got to see Richie Havens perform live many, many, many years ago. It was when I was still living in the USA. I was living in Philadelphia, and I went up to Boston for the first ever Folk Alliance conference. The Folk Alliance, this conference that happens every year. Usually, more recently, it's been happening a lot in Memphis. but I remember that first Folk Alliance, Richie Havens was there and he performed, and then when he sadly died, I thought, well, at least I got to see him. I got to see him live while he was still with us, and he was such a but he was such a wonderful. He was one of these people who just kind of radiated, he just kind of glowed, just the warmth and just the kindness in him really, really came across, especially when he was there in the room, and he had just such presence. And I feel really lucky I got to see him.
Yeah, Richie was amazing and everything. Who are some of the folks that have influenced your own career? I just mentioned some of the folks that I like, but who are some of the folks that
Yeah.
influenced your career? I imagine that you mentioned your mom and maybe some of the other relatives were performers as well. So maybe I'm thinking they were influences because I know that definitely my parents, who started a radio station in rural North Carolina, have influenced
Wow.
my own journey in entertainment and in particularly events and definitely in the radio and media space because dad actually taught in radio and mom is actually served in the philanthropy field. Both of them are retired from those fields, even though dad is still very active as an artist and mom is enjoying retirement and taking care of my two nephews as I don't have any of those uh, other humans called children and all in that space. So definitely that is something that I haven't had the pleasure of. And at 60, almost 61, don't know that that'll be happening in my lifetime unless there's the whole adoption thing all in that space. But definitely, I was just wondering, I definitely know about family legacies because of that. Because like I said, they started that station when I was in my teen years and it lasted for about 12 years. So like from about 76 to 86, 87, something like that, and definitely it thrust me into this media space that I've still been in for decades now, and definitely in the event space as well. And then, of course, I've worked with some of these different organizations that I just talked about also. But I was wondering about who were some of your influences.
Well, I mean, you mentioned my mother. She
Hmm.
clearly she was a big influence when I was little, because I used to, as I said, I used to listen to her sing and play and call out requests. My uncle also, um, I used to love listening to him play guitar and piano and sing too. And he's still he's still in Chicago, and he writes musicals. He writes musical theater. He's had won a couple of awards for his um, writing of musical theater. And then I've got two cousins who are in the music world, or three cousins actually who are in the music world. One of them, my cousin Adam, who produced one of my albums, actually is kind of an indie rock musician. So a very different world. He plays with a band called Mice Parade and a band called the Swirlies, and um, a very different style of music to mine. But it was great working with him and having him play on my that album, and as well as producing it and kind of broadening my musical horizons. And then I've got another cousin who's in the classical music world, and Jamie. He for many years he worked with. He was musical education director for the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, and now he's in Rhode Island. And he's working with an orchestra there, and I've forgotten which one it is offhand. But it's great. He's a great inspiration to me as well. And his son Austin, who is the one I nearly forgot about because Austin's a cousin once removed or whatever, but he's doing orchestral percussion now. Um, so and actually his wife is a wonderful singer who does musical theater on a professional level, and also as a voice teacher and so on. So I've got all of that, in my family. And I had my grandmother. There was a distant cousin of my grandmother's called Gamble Rogers, who died many years ago. But before he died, I do remember him coming to visit my grandmother's house, and she was. It was through talking to him. I was only about 5 at the time, so I didn't really talk to him, but I was in the room and I heard him talking to my grandmother about music and performing and storytelling and so on. And just being told afterwards, you know, this is, this gentleman, he's what he does for his job is he goes out and entertains people and tells stories and sings songs that he's written. And that was my first inkling that you could do that. And I thought, wow, what a great thing to do. Wouldn't that be nice to have your full-time job be going out and entertaining people and writing music and writing songs and performing them live. So I kind of owe that to Campbell Rogers. But then my mother had really eclectic tastes in music. So when I was little, we listened to lots of she liked old folk music, like all those she had all those wonderful Smithsonian Folkways albums, the ones on really kind of heavy vinyl,
Mhm.
I still have. um, but she also had a lot of classical music, and then she liked a lot of jazz too. She was particularly fond of Ella Fitzgerald, and we had the songbooks series, particularly the Ella Fitzgerald sings the Rodgers and Hart songbook. And um, and I used to listen to all those. And we actually had a Rodgers and Hart songbook sitting on the piano more or less permanently. And so I would listen to Ella Fitzgerald singing "It Never Entered My Mind," and then I'd try and play it on the piano and sing it the way Ella sang it. I didn't succeed very well, but I think she's always been. If you ever asked me to name a favorite singer, it would be Ella Fitzgerald, because I just love the way she just sings the song, and she's not she's not trying to she she just lands on every note perfectly. There's not all this. I think a lot of modern singers, they try and feel like they have to make the song something more than it is, and there's all this kind of dancing around the note, all this kind of and Ella Fitzgerald didn't do that. She just sang the note, and sang it beautifully, and you really hear that in those songbooks recordings. And so yeah, she was a wonderful singer. And then I got older, and I got into Joni Mitchell in a big way, and I got into playing guitar, and I got into all the Windham Hill guitarists, people like Michael Hedges and Alex DeGrassi, and Willie Ackerman, who were doing all kinds of really interesting stuff with the guitar, using alternative ways of tuning a guitar. So I got really excited about that. And then I discovered Nick Drake, who's another Nick Drake is another musician I always name as an influence, because he was a singer-songwriter and a wonderful guitarist. And you kind of have the sense with him that the guitar is of equal value to the voice. It's kind of, the guitar isn't just an accompanying instrument. It's like a duet for voice and guitar, where the voice and the guitar have equal value, and I really love that. But I listen to all kinds of music now. I mean, everything. It would be hard to name a genre of music that there's not at least one artist that I like and and would listen to. So and I think that's great. And I get classified as folk myself, because I'm a singer-songwriter, and because I'm playing, well, mostly acoustic instruments. I do play electric guitar and electric bass as well, and I play an electric keyboard, but it's basically acoustic more or less. And so I get called a folk musician, but I kind of would see myself as, um, I don't know. I'm trying to kind of appeal to as wide an audience as I can, and I think it's really nice when people come to my gigs and they go, "Well, I didn't know what to expect from this," and I'm not really a folk music fan, but I really love what you do, and that's what I really like to hear.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that I find, and I know folks that have worked in commercial radio as well as other mediums, including some of the internet radio spaces, like definitely Reverb Nation and other things along those lines, SoundCloud, even iHeart, and other things that are in that space. But I sometimes wonder whether it was a famous musician, and I forgot who it was, but he basically was either a jazz or blues musician, said that he didn't like to be classified with the musical style. He just liked to perform good music. And it might have been somebody like a Coltrane or a Miles or somebody along those lines. And it sounds to me like that's what you're saying, as well as that you don't necessarily like the classifications. I mean, you probably have
Yeah.
to be classified because of the needing to be labeled a certain kind of way by some of these tracking systems and all in that space. But it does sound like if you had your way, you would just rather be labeled as a musician versus any sort of style of music. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, the quote you're talking about, and I forget who said it too. All music is folks music, wasn't that it? I think it might. Was it Leadbelly? No, I'm not 100% sure. Somebody's gonna uh, call me out on that. I should remember who it was, but it's a great quote, and it's so true. And yeah, I think it can be really limiting, this business of having to classify yourself as a specific genre. I mean, it's really funny. Again, I started talking about if we dig any deeper, it could get dangerous. And what happened was right after we had recorded that album and with the song on it, we were touring in the States and we were listening to there's a group called the Easy Star All Stars,
Mhm.
and they had done a dub version of The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd called Dub Side of the Moon, where they did all of the songs on the dark side of the moon, but in a dub reggae style, which I thought was fantastic. And we started joking around and going, oh man, we should do a dub version of If We Dig Any Deeper, It Could Get Dangerous, and we could call it If We Dub Any Deeper, It Could Get Dangerous. And then uh, Tim came along, and yeah, what Martin was working with Tim on another project, and this is years later from when we had that conversation about the Dub Any Deeper thing, and Martin phoned me up and said, "You're not going to believe this, but you know." Tim mentioned that he was working on a dub remix of somebody else's album, and I said to him, "Would you like to try and do a dub remix of If We Dig Any Deeper, It Could Get Dangerous?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, he'd love to." So he said, "Do you mind if I give the stems, from the original recording to Tim and see what he can do with them?" And it's the first time I've ever had a track of mine kind of remixed by somebody totally unconnected with it, without my having any kind of. I mean, I didn't really have any involvement in the remix. He just took my original guitar and vocal tracks and did all kinds of interesting things with them and gave it this wonderful big kind of dub reggae echo sound, and added some extra programming and keyboards and things on. And to me, it's Tim's version of the song, it's Tim's remix that really brings out that environmental message that was always in the original song, but which maybe my original performance of it didn't bring that out enough, maybe because I was so close to thinking about my son digging a hole. A lot of people just took it up as being that literal meaning, whereas when you hear Tim's version, somehow, because it's kind of, he puts different chords to it, and there are these kind of ominous sounding chords where you get this real sense of impending apocalypse that I talk about in the song. I say we're bringing fire and flood and trembling ground. um, but are we still together? I've lost my picture of you, but anyway, yeah, we I felt like Tim's version of it, which has just come out and has been getting some radio airplay. Uh, it's been great to hear that extra layer of meaning really being brought out in the song.
How do you feel about people that do uh, mixes and dubs and samples of sounds? Because I do know that that was something that was very popular in hip hop, popular in some rock and some other musical styles. And I know some musicians are not the biggest fans, while others don't mind. But what is your opinion of dubbed music?
Oh, I think it's brilliant. Yeah, no, I'm totally a fan. I mean, I think, a new version using samples and things like that of a song can really bring out something in the song that isn't necessarily something that people would have picked up on straight away. Like, I remember hearing the original Aerosmith version of Walk This Way, and I was like,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, whatever. And then I heard the Run DMC Aerosmith version of Walk This Way, where Run DMC kind of took the song and then gave it a whole different vibe and everything. And suddenly I loved the song, which I wouldn't have looked twice at the original Aerosmith version of it. But yeah, it kind of brought out something in the song that I guess was always there underneath, waiting to be brought out. But it was Run DMC's version of it that brought it out.
Yeah, no doubt. I was thinking that there are certain folk singers I've had the pleasure of seeing perform, and some I wish I did see the pleasure to perform because I can't remember if I saw Joan Baez or not. I definitely saw Odetta because Odetta played at one of the Bull Durham blues festivals that we used to have, and it was on hold because of the pandemic. And hopefully it'll come back, if not this year, next year, and all in that kind of space. But it's definitely had some amazing artists that have played, including Solomon Burke and a number of other ones here in Durham at the old ballpark, and then eventually here at Hayti, which is where it was held the last, I think, couple of times it was done before the pandemic and everything. But I was just thinking about those two musicians as somebody that I really enjoy, and also Robbie Kamala, because I had the pleasure of working with Robbie because we were part of a group called the Funky Eye Puppets that was of the opinion that, IPC is the person that created that, and he also worked with George Lucas. But part of that is a children audio theater kind of cartoon or kind of troupe that dealt with a lot of issues and bringing those issues to forefront, but using theater and audio theater to get the messages out. And he created this whole group that I was part of called the Funky Eye Puppets. I need to get back in touch with them because they were doing all kinds of great performances, and there were people from literally all over the world. I remember one of the gentlemen was from England. There were one or two from California. There were some from Texas. There were definitely some from, I think, one of the African nations and a couple of other places. And we would play these various characters. But part of what he was talking about was the need to bring childlike wonder into our lives. So I was wondering if that's something that you try to bring to your music as well, because I sometimes see that we as adults can get a little bit overly serious, and sometimes we forget the childlike aspect of our lives. But I was just wondering if that's something that you try to bring in part of your musical message as well.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a specific track to cite as an example, but certainly I think well, I suppose in last song where I'm talking about being a child, and then I'm talking about my own children as well, and you know their reaction to my playing as well, and my that whole sort of intergenerational thing that goes on in that song. Um, would certainly be an example of that. Yeah, it sounds amazing. Your group. I hope I get to hear them sometime. I'm coming over to your part of the world, by the way, in the fall.
Okay.
I'm finally going to be getting to do a U.S. tour again for the first time since COVID. I was last in the USA and on tour in 2019, but I know. I'm looking actually for some shows in the kind of Durham Raleigh area because I've got a show in Asheville, and I've got a show in Deep Gap, which is kind of west of Asheville, and then I've got a show up in Elkin, North Carolina, um, but nothing as yet in the Raleigh Durham area. So hopefully,
Mhm.
but I've still got a few empty days to fill. So hopefully, I can find something
There's all kinds of
not
venues.
far
Like I
from where
said,
you are.
John Brown is a friend of mine, and he's the uh, provost over there at Duke, and he's definitely part of the head of the arts program over there and all in that space. So I've known
Oh,
John for a long time, and he definitely brings musicians in to perform with the students there and all in that space. So he is definitely innovative. And then there are venues like the Lincoln Theater and the Poorhouse, and of course here at the Hayti we bring in musicians all the time. It's primarily an African American Cultural Arts Center, but we do bring in musicians of various sorts. Like I said, the Durham Symphony will be here, and that'll be a you know cast of people that are mixed ethnicities and mixed backgrounds and everything. So it will definitely be a very universal concert in that sense and everything. So we're definitely they have performed. I think Mallarmé has performed here a few times, which is a chamber orchestra, and definitely we are always looking at different other kinds of programming. So I'm
oh,
sure that there are
fantastic.
possibilities here as well as other locations. I know a lot of folks get excited and want to come to the DPAC, which is our super big venue here in Durham. I think it seats like a little bit like 2,000 plus and everything, but there are
Little big for me.
smaller venues like Motorco and Pinhook do a lot in the folk industry right here in Durham and all of that. As a matter of fact, I want to say that the one of the owners, and I think she's the principal owner of the Pinhook, also has her own female singing group called Midtown Dickens, and they are very popular in the folk industry as well. So definitely there are folks like that, and then the Pinkerton Rage, which my friend Jesse is the organizer of that, and then a lot of people know John Howie because of his country music kind of background, and he also did Jeepers Creepers, the soundtrack to that movie and everything. So he's done some soundtrack work as well. So have you done any of that kind of work? Have you had any of your stuff used for movies either here in the States or in other parts of the world as well?
Yeah, just recently, I was so happy. There was a short documentary film made by an environmental organization here in England. I'm desperately trying to remember the name of it offhand. I'd have to look it up on my website. But yeah, they used a bunch of my songs for a short film that they made about water and about clean water, and so that was really really fantastic. I was so honored to have my music used in that way, and I also I wrote some original music for a short film that a friend of mine was making, but sadly the film never got released. But the soundtrack exists, you know. So I've got actually a page of my website devoted to that. So people can look it up. But I give workshops as well. By the way, you mentioned Duke University and their music series. So quite often when I perform, I've performed at a few colleges and universities, and often I've given workshops or master classes to the music students there as well, especially on the guitar tuning that I use, which I wrote a book about. I wrote a book about the DADGAD tuning, which is a different way of tuning the guitar, and so I've given a lot of workshops on that. So, and songwriting workshops as well. I've given at various festivals and educational institutions. So that's another another thing is sort of string to my bow.
What do you think is the key to a good songwriter? Because I know some people will be like with poetry that you should just be writing in general.
Yeah, well, you should write all the time.
Right.
I don't write nearly enough. I'm always writing down ideas for songs, but my I find it hard to really sit down and finish songs unless I block out a big block of time, like when I have an album coming up and I go, right, okay, I got to finish some songs and get them all ready to go out and perform and record.
I'm doing good.
So so yeah,
Doing
I think it's
good.
important to do it, and important to just keep the work, keep putting the work in, keep putting the time in, and I also think that it's really important to write in such a way that you can find some kind of message that everybody. It's I think that when you know you've really done your job as a songwriter is if somebody comes up to you, and it's happened to me a bunch of times at my gigs where somebody comes up and says, I felt like that song you wrote was about me, you know. And that's, I think, the greatest compliment anybody can pay to a songwriter is to say that a song that you wrote kind of spoke to them in some really personal way. And so I think that's important, to kind of write with a view to leaving your songs open to a certain amount of interpretation so that other people can take them on and take them on board and feel like your song isn't just about your life, it's about their life.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What is it that's unique about your style that you were talking about with tuning? Because I do know some folks that are into tuning and into musical aspects. So, what is it about this particular style that is quite unique?
Well, it's, I mean, loads of people use the dad cat tuning, so it's not unique to me, but it's certainly, I, I suppose I wrote a book on it that has become the kind of standard reference. So a lot of guitarists, other guitarists who I really respect, have referred to my book and to my playing in DADGAD. It's a different way. It's just a different way of tuning a guitar. So standard tuned guitar is tuned E A D G B E, and you can and quite a few guitarists use variations on that. You know, they might just tune the bottom string down to D, or they might tune the strings so they become a chord. And with Dadgad, you've tuned the bottom string from E down to D, and then you've also tuned the top string from E down to D, and then you tune your second string, what would normally be a B string, you tune that down to A. So then the strings are D, A, D, G, A, D, which is why people call it Dadgad. It's just a phonetic representation of the notes. And what that gives you is, because you have three different strings tuned to D and two different strings tuned to A, you get loads of what's called sympathetic resonance. I don't know if you know instruments like an Indian sitar or a viola d'amore or a hurdy-gurdy. There are a lot of instruments out there that have these strings underneath the strings that are played, but have strings that are just there to resonate and sound, even though you don't ever touch those strings. But if you hit a note, or even if there's a recording in the room playing which has a note that a guitar string is tuned to, that you can sing a guitar at a guitar and make it sound without ever touching the guitar, because the string will start resonating. If you've hummed the right frequency at it, the string will start resonating and sounding in sympathy with you, which I think is just amazing. It blows my mind, but it happens. You can test it out just by humming a note at a guitar if you have a guitar in the room, and as long as it's a note that one of your strings is tuned to. So then when you're playing and you have all these strings that are capable of resonating in sympathy with the strings that you're playing because they're all tuned to similar frequencies, you get loads of this extra resonance, and it just gives you this lovely, really big, full, rich sound. And it also gives you, it's a lot of, there's a lot you can do with very kind of simple chord shapes. You can it's very difficult to play anything that doesn't sound nice when you've got it tuned to Dadgad. You can play up and down, so you can play up and down the neck and, move chords around to different places on the neck of the guitar. And it just gives you so much flexibility and variety in what you can do, which I think for me as a solo performer without a band to create variety, I've got to create the variety myself and make my own songs all sound different. And I think that's much easier to do when I'm playing them in Dadgad. And again, if people want to see examples, they can look at the videos on YouTube. I always have my guitar in Dadgad. I don't use any other tuning now. It's years since I've played in standard tuning, because I just found I never ran out of options with Dadgad to do things that were new and a bit different.
Speaking of your music and everything, I was going to ask you really quickly a couple of other questions, and we'll get it up very shortly. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and everything. But I did want people to hear samples of your music. But I was wondering if you could speak to your views about how we're doing as a people with the climate and everything. And then I'm going to play the song that you did that dealt with the climate and all in those spaces. But definitely, I'd love to hear your views as to how we're doing in this climate conversation.
I think we're doing appallingly, and it's so sad. And I think what's really sad, I think, is that so many of us as individuals are trying to do our own little individual thing, doing our recycling. We put out the recycling and we feel good about ourselves because we've done our bit for the climate, but unfortunately, all of us as individuals putting out our recycling isn't going to save the planet. The planet is in serious danger. We've got species. There's an alarming rate of species becoming extinct. Polar ice caps are melting, which has the potential to actually change the course of the Gulf Stream and could put, like where I live in England, we're up on a level with Greenland, but because of the Gulf Stream, we have a temperate climate. But our this island I live on could become pretty difficult to live on if the Gulf Stream does change and stop warming us up. It's unfortunately climate change is happening already, and the only way we're going to stop it is if governments do all over the world simultaneously do something to fix it, and which they're not doing at the moment, and it's a real worry. And as I say, we can all we can all do our recycling and reducing and reusing, and that's a great thing to do and an important thing to do. And we can try and buy food locally. I think it's really important to try and support local food producers and not buy food that's been flown halfway around the world.
Yeah.
So we can all do our thing, but really the governments worldwide, internationally, need to step up and start doing their bit as well to do something about what we're doing to the planet. And it's such a lovely planet, and it would be a real shame to destroy it because it's so beautiful. This world is so beautiful, and we're so lucky to live in it. And we just need to be better stewards of it than we have been.
Well, we're going to play the video If We Dig Any Deeper, which is definitely that climate change song that I was referring to. And I've got a couple of other ones that I was going to play of yours as well, including the ones from the one that you did music videos of that are associated with the cathedral and all in that space. But did have another question I was going to ask you about education, but we'll come back to that right after we hear If We Dig Any Deeper. What a powerful song, no doubt about it, and definitely was enjoying that, and definitely a powerful message. When I think of music and creative arts, and actually the gentleman that came in earlier is a theater person and all in that space, I think about how important that can be in terms of developing critical thinking. And I know here in the United States, sometimes the arts are the first things that get cut, unfortunately. And I think that that's a worldwide problem as well. So I'm just wondering your thoughts about the teaching of the arts, whether it's here in the United States or whether it's in uh, England and even other parts of the European Union? And do you think we're doing enough to support the arts? Because I do think that the arts are vital because they help learn about critical thinking. But I would love to hear your thoughts about support of the arts and whether we as a country and as a world are doing enough to support our artists.
Not well, certainly here in England, not remotely enough. It's really sad. England had a great system for teaching music in schools. When I first moved here and my kids were small and they were starting off in the school system here, I was so happy because there was a system for teaching music in schools. And there's a lovely comment from Bill. Thank you, Bill. And there was a system whereby if a child wanted to learn a musical instrument and couldn't afford to buy a musical instrument, there was funding available to loan that child an instrument while they were learning it, whatever that instrument be, whether that be a violin or a French horn or whatever, trombone, whatever they wanted to learn. The funding was there for the child to have individual music lessons on the instrument of their choice and to have the loan of an instrument, so that regardless of what their social background was, regardless of their income, that they would have the opportunity to have that instrument and take it home and play it and practice on it and then get lessons in school. And that is gone. That funding has been taken away, and we're being told, I'm sorry, I get very impassioned about this, but we're being told that we should just focus on math and science and that nothing else is important. And I couldn't disagree with that more vehemently. I mean, frankly, I don't know what all the fuss about math is, because to me, if you're gonna defund a subject, I mean, I don't think any subject should be defunded, but why not defund math, since we all have calculators anyway? our phones can do the maths for us. How often in your life, um, after you get out of school, do you actually use your math skills? Whereas music, even if you're not going to be a professional musician, it's good to have music in our lives. And I think it's so sad that music kind of has to such an extent been relegated to the professional sphere, where people don't so much anymore. It used to be every house, it had at least one musical instrument in the house that somebody played just for fun. My mother was never a professional musician. She played for fun, because she loved it. And so did so many of her friends. And, even when I was a kid, when I was a teenager and we'd go to parties, there'd be loads of people with guitars and we'd all sit around and sing. I wonder how much that happens now at teenage parties. Maybe it still does. I hope it still does. But I think it would be a lot more likely to happen if there was a bit more government support for musical education in the schools, because I think that is so important and it should not be defunded.
No, I agree with you on that. You said that musicians don't necessarily have to. We have the calculators and we have the computers and everything that can do the math. Well, there's AI out there now, and I do know that there are people that are writing songs using AI and even doing musical things using AI. So I was wondering, is that ever a fear of yours, that some of these creative things may take the human out of the musical equation?
Well, okay. I mean, to be honest, it's there is a real worry, because radio stations are always trying to save money any way they can. So if an AI can generate a hit song that is fine to have as background music, that a radio station can just play out and not have to pay real human being artists for the use of their music. Well, that is a danger and a threat to music, I think. I mean, we've already seen how recently uh, until very recently here in England, the BBC, the British Broadcasting Service, the sort of national television and radio company had an orchestra and had a choir and had a team of musicians who were paid to perform on TV and on the radio, and they've just the musicians union here is fighting it like crazy, but they're trying to get rid of all of it. They're trying to disband the BBC singers and the BBC orchestra, and because it would save them some money, and I think that is so sad. Similarly, in musical theater, it used to be a musical. If you went to see a musical, there was an orchestra in the pit playing the instruments, and increasingly now musicals are getting rid of their musicians and just using recorded musicians and having the singers sing to backing tracks. So there is a threat. I like to believe that people will still kind of recognize the difference between manufactured music and individual creativity, and that there will still be a place for individual creativity. But I think the biggest threat is from people is towards basically people not being able to spend time playing music because it's so difficult to make a living from these days, because it used to be that they when radio first started up, musicians used to go into radio stations and sit down and play music live in the room. I still do that occasionally when I'm doing interviews, and it's really nice. But now most radio stations, it's just recorded music. There's not so much live music on the radio. But I think when people hear it, they respond to it, and I like to think that will incentivize the radio stations to keep having live performers come in at least occasionally, and that they'll hopefully want to still play songs that are written by real individual people and not by AIs.
Definitely. I guess the flip side of that is that we saw during the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, a lot of people were not depending on radio alone to have their success. They were using things like Spotify, they were using things like YouTube, they were using a number of other ways of getting their message out. So it did kind of democratize things, because we do know, those of us that have worked in radio, and most of my radio work has been in the public radio space and community radio spaces, but I've definitely worked and had friends that have worked. I haven't done that any work in commercial radio, but I have had friends that work in there, and we know that a lot of those are controlled by one or two entities, maybe 3 or 4 of the max, whether that's Clear Channel, Live Nation, or a number of other things. So it becomes very cookie cutter and all in that space. And I know a lot of musicians started fighting against that, Prince being a prime example of that, by getting their own control of their own catalogs, and also making sure that they got it out, not just in the traditional distribution sources, but also some of these web distribution sources as well. Because I know Reverb Nation is actually based here in North Carolina, and a lot of people were using Reverb Nation to make sure that they got out as well. So how important has it been to have these tools in these last 5 to 10 years? And do you have the same frustrations there in London that folks have had in the United States, that too often the commercial radio stations don't want to give the up and coming artists, or even the developed artists that are in another medium other than the quote unquote popular or rock mediums, that the dues that they need and the coverage that they need and everything? Because sometimes they have like a playlist that is very limited, and it's the same songs over and over, and they don't really give enough support to independent artists. But I was just wondering your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I should mention, by the way, I'm not in London. I'm way down here in Cornwall, in the far southwest of England. But I do go up to London every now and again. But it's a long way away. I've performed there though, and I do love living where I live, way down in the. I'm in the middle of the country. I'm surrounded by farms, so very different kind of place. And it was a wonderful place to be. When we had lockdown and we couldn't go out and see other people, it was great to be able to go for walks around where I live, which is lovely. But but yeah, I think it's sad that so many DJs, radio DJs, they don't, very few of them anymore have any choice or say over the music that they play. Most of them, there is a playlist and they just have to play what's on the playlist and pretend that they're enthusiastic about it, even if they aren't, which is so sad. I mean, there still are radio shows
Right.
where where the presenter, or at the very least the producer, has a say over the material that's played, and that's great. And as I say, there are a lot of radio shows out there on both public radio and community radio, where and even to an extent on BBC. I don't know. That's sort of a gray area between commercial and non-commercial radio. They're non-commercial, but they but they at the same time they're under increasing pressure to actually make money. But or certainly to save money. But yeah, I've been able to go in as a guest on various radio stations around the world. I mean, anytime when I'm on tour, I always reach out to all the local radio stations and ask if they want, if they'd like to have me come in as musical guest, do a bit of an interview, talk about my upcoming show. And often I've been able to do that, and it's been great. But it is great the way there is now this wonderful podcasting phenomenon where anybody can do their own podcast and put it up on Spotify or on one of the many other podcasting platforms, and so that kind of that a lot of the barriers have been removed. You don't have to know the right person to get a radio show. Anybody can have a radio show, and they can run that radio show from their home wherever they live, and that's really wonderful. And it's wonderful that there's so much music out there, and then things like Bandcamp as well, as a platform for selling music. Any artist can make an album. They can record it at home and they can put it up on Bandcamp, and it means there's a lot of music out there to kind of cut through before anybody gets to hear you. But as I say, it has removed a lot of the barriers, and there's more new music out there, I think, now than there's ever been. I mean, there is a wonderful radio show that I listen to that's on a Saturday evening that I listen to every Saturday when I'm at home, and I was listening to it last night. And it's a new music radio show, so they don't play anything that isn't newly released, and it's just fantastic to get a sense of all the new music that's out there, and most of it is self-released. Most of what they play on that show, it's not out on commercial record labels. It's mostly self-released by the artists, and it's fantastic music, and it's music that I probably would never hear actually if it weren't for that particular radio show, because I kind of they're my link to new music, and so many times after I hear a track on that show, I go on to Bandcamp and then I'm buying it direct from the artist. So and that's fantastic, and that's a thing that is new to this generation. It didn't used to exist, and it's great.
No, that's very true. That's very much. You mentioned being in Cornwall and that being a rural area. I was actually talking to my mom yesterday. She's actually playing Dr. Mom because my brother had some surgery on his kneecap. So she took him up to her house he lives here in Durham in a separate house than me, but they still lives in the same town. But she took him up there to give him some TLC attention while he is recouping. He will pick up my nephews, his kids on, I think, Monday or tomorrow. So then he'll probably be back at his home front. But she just felt that he needed that mother's TLC care in at least for a couple of days. And so she grabbed him and took him on back to that house. But while she was there, she was talking about seeing the turkeys, because there are turkeys and deer family, but she had not seen them for a while, but she did see them yesterday. So they were out and about and everything. So I was just wondering, you just kind of mentioned that walk, and I am a big fan of Mother Nature, but how important is the nature conversation and the observation of nature to you in your life. That's why I brought up what Mom said about seeing that turkey as part of that turkey family that she had not seen for I want to say a couple of weeks now, but she was just glad and put some joy in her heart to see them back out and strutting. And I'm sure the deers will be next.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so lucky to live where I do, and I feel lucky on behalf of my kids that they've been able to grow up. We always, as a family, go out for walks a lot. Even now, my kids are teenagers. We still go out for walks together. Anybody who follows me on Instagram has seen lots of Instagram pictures of me, and usually you see the backs of my family striding away from me when we're going for walks, because I'm kind of hanging back to take a picture. Um, but yeah, no, it's so important, and I think so many times I do. When you're a musician, you do a lot of admin work. You do an awful lot of answering emails, an awful lot of updating the website and booking concerts, and you know, all that, and doing your accounts and all that stuff. And my shoulders, as I'm working, my shoulders are getting higher and higher, going, at the computer, working away. And it's when I get out for a walk, especially a walk with my family, um, that the shoulders suddenly drop. And it's like, and I can breathe again. And I think nature has so much to offer us, which again is why we should take better care of it. But
No, we definitely have to take better care of it. But the other thing we sometimes have to take better care of is ourselves. And I know
yeah,
that as entrepreneurs and definitely musicians are some of the greatest entrepreneurs out there, there's the whole notion of the work-life balance. And I know that's
oh
something we
yeah.
talk about regularly here. So how do you manage that work-life balance? Because you definitely have said several times about the family. So you do have the family commitments. You also have the regular commitments of the music and everything. It sounds like the music is your full-time job, even though I do know some
Yeah.
people even here that because of the economy have to do side gigs along with their music, whether that's working the stereotypical bar job or whether that's driving Uber or Lyft or a number of other ways. And even myself, I have got multiple jobs. As you can see, I'm over here at the HTAB, but I also have worked with a testing company and I've done other things while helping Pod TV, which is this live streaming network, get their stuff off the ground as their programming person and all in that space. So I oftentimes find that it's hard to have one job. You've got to have multiple streams of income and multiple jobs. But I just wonder how you balance that, whether you have to find yourself doing other work and also how you balance the work-life balance.
It's really hard. It's really hard, and I don't do a good enough job of it. I'm really terrible at making time. I have to really force myself to make time, and usually there's some kind of a deadline. Like I spent a lot of time today working out in our garden because I had potatoes that were ready to plant, and and I'm leaving on tour on Friday morning, and I knew if I didn't get the potatoes into the ground today, they weren't going to get into the ground at all. So I've still got more stuff I've got to plant as well between now and Friday, and a load of work I've got to do, and I want to spend time with my family as well because I'm going to go on tour with for 5 weeks and not see them while I'm away. And it's just really hard to find time for all of it. I mean, I and I do, I make my living from music. I couldn't do it if I didn't A, have support from people on Patreon, B, I still get some government support as well because my husband and I both have low paying jobs. We get our income is topped up by a small amount. We're getting £40 a week at the moment. In what's called tax credits. It's kind of like reverse taxation. If you're on a low income here, you get tax credits. We're also very lucky that at the moment here in England, so far we still have a national health system. So we don't have to pay for health insurance or for medical bills. If we go and see the doctor, it costs nothing. If we go into the hospital and have an operation, we don't have to pay anything. And we don't have health insurance at all. When I travel in the USA, I have to get travel health insurance. And that's suddenly a big expense because I don't need health insurance living here. Because if I go to the doctor, it's not going to cost anything. And that's a huge privilege. And also we live, our kids went to local non-fee paying schools. So we didn't have to pay anything for the kids' education, and they get support for going to. My son's at the older one is at university now, and he doesn't have to pay. He has a student loan, and if he ever makes enough money, he'll have to start paying back his student loan. But for the moment, we're not having to shell out any money to keep him at university
Right.
or to pay his living expenses. It's all coming out of his student loan. So, and the deal with student loans is in England is that you don't have to start paying them back until your income goes over a certain threshold. So, I mean, if his income is like ours, is like mine and my husband's, and stays under 30 grand, for the rest of his life, then he'll never have to pay off his student loan.
Wow. Is your
But,
husband
but,
is your
but
husband a
we're
fellow
poor, but
is your husband a fellow creative?
yeah, he's an artist, a visual artist, and he works he doesn't have a part-time job. He works part-time in a local art school, which is great because it's still involved with art. He's a studio manager at the local art school, so he looks after the studios and the supplies, art supplies, make sure there's enough of the right kinds of paint and paper and everything like that. And then he works there 25 hours a week, and then the rest of the time he just works on his own art. So we're on a ridiculously low income. We are poor by any definition, but we have the time to work on creative stuff, and we're not worried about medical bills or education bills. So we just have to feed ourselves and keep the power on, which is kind of hard, But hey, we're trying to save money on. At least we have some land we can grow vegetables on. So the potato patch will keep us alive if all else fails.
That makes sense. But if he ever gets a chance, he can check out at bambooturtle.com. Like I said before, my dad is an artist, and this is actually some examples of some of his artwork and everything. But that's
Wow.
my dad's artwork, and he's been doing artwork and had a lot of great shows and has gotten some recognition from not just our local arts council, but from some of the other arts organizations, both here in the state and around the Southeast and even outside of the Southeast. But he has definitely done some amazing artwork. So always proud of dad's artwork, just like I'm proud of some of the things that mom does as well. But that is dad's art space. But as you can tell, he does a lot of variant styles of art and all in that way. But yeah, that's dad's kind of artwork that he has. One thing that I was curious about, and I'm going to wrap up. I know we've been talking for a while, and I've definitely enjoyed the conversation. I hope you have as well. And we're going to play at least two more of your videos. But one thing that I was curious about, you mentioned the potatoes and having to get the potatoes in the ground and all along those lines. And that being said and everything, I have a friend at the apartment complex that I live at that is in another part. She's in a different building, but she's done a garden, I want to say, for 4 or 5 years. And she is a younger lady, probably in her early 30s, but she's originally from Brazil, and she has planted everything from tomatoes to, I think, some cucumbers to a number of other things. But one thing that she plants just about every year, which I think is one of the things that people enjoy in our complexes, is trying to see how tall it will grow, is she always plants a sunflower. At least she's done that for 3 or 4 years and everything. So I was wondering if there was anything unique plant-wise that you try to get in the ground, or a unique food that you try to get among your garden. Because like I said, she is known for having that sunflower. And I know it can't trying to remember, it was up last year, but I know that 3 years before it was definitely up and everything. But I'm pretty sure she'll have it up this year.
Well, the foods that I plant are pretty basic. I'm afraid there's nothing very exotic. You're talking your potatoes and carrots and onions and spring onions and radishes and easy stuff that's not going to and spinach, some salad leaves and things like that. Yeah, it's nothing really exciting food wise. One thing I did though, just this year, that I was really excited about is there's pictures of it on my Instagram page. I've got, there's a kind of a shady part of the garden that's under a big yellow gorse bush. Gorse is kind of wonderful. It's quite prickly, but it's beautiful because it's got these beautiful yellow flowers, and once you sort of dive underneath it, you can get in under the prickly bit, and then you're in this little kind of cave almost. And that kind of cave under the gorse was all filled up as of as of last winter, even was all filled up with horrible ivy and brambles. But I managed to get in there over the winter and clear out all the brambles and the ivy, and I planted bluebells.
Mhm.
I can't remember. Do you have bluebells in America? I grew up in America, and I can't remember whether you have
We
bluebells.
have bluebells, but then again,
Beautiful
I had forgotten
flowers
that we
that
have.
grow in
I had
spring.
forgotten that we had canaries until I saw one yesterday. But and I was like, "What's that yellowbird doing here?" and everything. And I was talking to my mom, like I said, and she was like, "Yeah, we have canaries here." And I'm like, "Okay." I forgot
Okay.
that we had canaries, but yeah, but let me see if bluebells. For some reason, I'm thinking that bluebells are in North Carolina, but that's what I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
before.
there's a bluebells that is named for this area because there is the
Oh, really?
Virginia bluebells. The
Oh,
Virginia
cool.
so yes,
Well,
there are bluebells in the South.
oh, good. Well, they're beautiful, and they grow in the spring, and they're lovely and blue. And I, before I went away on my European tour, I was on tour in uh, uh, Netherlands and Germany and Denmark for 5 weeks in March. But just before I went away, I planted some bluebells underneath in this cleared area, the space that I'd made underneath the gorse, and I put down a load of bark chippings as well. I got a local tree surgeon to come and for £20, which was pretty cheap. He dumped a big, huge truckload of bark chippings on my drive, and I shoveled those underneath the gorse where the. So I'm hoping that all those bark chippings are going to help to keep down the brambles from regrowing. But the bluebells, when I came back from that tour, they've got these lovely blue flowers on them, and they need to spread more. There's just a few growing under there, but it's really nice to see those flowers that I planted before I went away, and they've already got flowers on them, which is
It
lovely.
sounds like that's amazing and apparently very pretty. We'll have to check them out on your Instagram page and everything. I know the other thing that a lot of musicians are concerned about is making sure that they get the right pay. You mentioned going on tour, and I know a lot of times musicians are unfortunately cheated out of music or they are given that old narrative, you're going to do it for exposure. And I think that if you've done it for 20 or 30 years, you're past the exposure conversation. And definitely, I know that people will, not pay their musicians or their other creatives as much as they will pay other service workers. But, you're not going to try to cheat a plumber out of money. Whatever they're going to charge you is what you're going to wind up paying. But I do find that even some of the clubs and even some of the venues are not always fair to the musicians and will try to cheat them down. I started using another expression, but I won't use that because it might be offensive to certain organizations and certain people and everything, but definitely cheat them down and all in that space. But I was just wondering if you could speak to that because I do think that sometimes we don't give enough just dues to the musicians. And as you just said, both you and your husband, who is a visual artist, are not probably getting paid your worth and everything. So how do you deal with that, and how do you make sure that people are at least paying you somewhat comparable to what your worth is?
Well, I just don't take a gig if it's unless there's a really good reason if it's not going to pay adequately. I mean, it's not like it doesn't. None of the gigs I do pay amazingly. You know, it's when you fresh. It's really funny because people look at what you get paid for a concert and they go, "Oh, you just stood up and played for 2 hours and you get paid that amount of money." And gosh, that's a really good hourly rate. And the thing is, your hourly rate isn't the 2 hours that you spent doing the concert. It's the weeks of preparation and the rehearsing and then if you're like me and you're doing your own kind of DIY kind of tour booking and everything like that, the hours and hours and hours of admin that you put in. I mean, I work way too long hours on the admin side of things, and I need to start blocking out more time for music. But I mean, I could work 60 hours a week on admin and I'd still be behind, in all the emails and the tour booking and the website updating and the social media as well. I've had to really, really limit my social media time, and just because I have to do it for the music, it's not just a fun thing. I have to talk about on social media about my gigs, and I now only do that for 1 hour a day at the beginning
I
of the
was
day.
going to say, how do you
I don't
manage?
look at social media the rest of the day.
How do you even manage this social hours? Because if you're doing 60 hours of admin work, and I'm not arguing with you, because I know that I probably do that for TV just alone and everything. But if you're doing 60 hours of admin work and you're probably doing 50 to 60 hours of music rehearsal work and other kinds of work, that's 120 hours. Where's the rest of the hours in the week and everything?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't say I actually do 60 hours a week on admin. I was saying I could do that and I'd still be behind. I still wouldn't keep up with the workload. I mean, I don't know. It varies. I kind of do whatever's screaming loudest, you know. So, you know, the past few days, I was desperately trying to get more gigs booked in for my American tour. So I was basically spending all day, every day, working on tour booking, and then I suddenly realized that the potatoes hadn't been planted yet, and I was about to go away on tour. So then I just spent a couple of days just doing straight gardening, pretty much, and then and now I've just realized I have a concert this coming Friday, and I haven't played any guitar since I got home from my tour. Or
Wow.
piano. So I'm gonna have to do some rehearsing this week. So I'm gonna have to block out time for that. But I would love to be more organized and to be able to say to you, well, I spent this number of hours per day rehearsing and this number of hours per day working on my computer, answering emails, booking gigs, and then I make sure and spend this number of hours with my family, and I this number of hours. I mean, the house is a state. Our house. I haven't run a vacuum cleaner and I don't know how long. It's terrible.
Yeah,
I'm
don't talk to me
happy to
about
have
don't talk
better.
to me about that. My house looks like a
Yeah,
train. My house looks like a train wreck. So and I
yeah,
need to
yeah,
fix
yeah.
that
That
train wreck up at some point.
the house is a train, and I'm not. I don't mind cleaning. I quite like cleaning if I had time for it, and I've just had to like be no. Does it need to be done? No, it doesn't need to be done. So I'm not going to do that because there are other things that are screaming louder. But yeah, it's basically feed the baby that's screaming loudest. It's kind
You
of the way
definitely got to do that and everything. As we get ready to wind down and all of that, I was going to play Charlie's Gone Home, and I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about what that's all about, and then I might have one more after I ask the question that I asked all the guests. But this has been a fun, almost 2 hour conversation. Didn't know how long it's going to
I.
last, but definitely has been
Go
enjoyable. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. But before I get to Charlie's Gone Home, if you could tell folks a little bit about what that's all about.
That's one of the first songs I ever wrote, actually. It's a song that I recorded on my very first album way back in 1997. And then I decided to revisit it when we went into St. Buryan Church to make the St. Buryan Sessions album, because it is, of all the songs I've written, that song, a lot of people would tell me that, they kind of felt like it spoke to them and it was about their life in some way. And, and I thought that was really nice because, like, when I wrote it, I was thinking about kind of a specific person who would sort of come to visit and just completely sort of take over, and be great fun and very entertaining and everything like that. But then you'd sort of have to you'd need a lot of downtime to recover from it afterwards. But I think we probably all have somebody in our lives like that, and it's just a song about when that person who's kind of amused you and entertained you and been great fun and at the same time been totally exhausting. When they leave and then there you are cleaning the kitchen. And it's funny, I should have mentioned housework because it's in the very first line of the song. Charlie's gone home now, dropped him off at the station, drove him downtown, dropped him off at the station. I'm sweeping the floors now, changing the sheets and organizing the kitchen. And it's funny, it's a long time since I wrote that song, but I can still feel it when I sing it.
And some people, that's their attitude, even when it's a short visit, because I know that my dad and my brother are both very private individuals and everything. And it is my personal belief that they sometimes have their own, like, limitations as to how long the folks need to be in their circle and everything. And you can tell that at some point they're like, okay, it's been good. We've caught up. We've had our conversation. Now it's time for you to go move on and do what you got to do, and I've got to do what I've got to do. So they have their time limits, and sometimes those time limits may not be your time limits, but they definitely are aware of their toleration of certain folks and certain individuals, and you can definitely tell that sometimes.
There's a really interesting thing I read once about introverts and extroverts, and it said introverts it's not that introverts don't like to be around people. They really like to be around people. They really like to interact with people, but they find that interaction really tiring.
Right.
And they need time to recover afterwards. So it's not that they don't enjoy being with other people, and it's not that they don't want to be with other people, but they have to limit the amount of time they spend with other people, because they need time to and go back and be alone and recover from it, so that they can then go back out there and enjoy it again.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So we're going to check out this song called Charlie's Gone Home. And then I've got that question that I ask everybody. And then we'll get ready to get out of here as I play the last song, which I think is another one from the St. Bernian session as well. I think it might be the one about that was entering the old city. Well, that's actually the title of the whole thing, but I'll find out which one it is. But right now, let's check out Charlie's Gone Home.
Charlie's gone home now. I drove him downtown and dropped him off at the station. I'm sweeping the floors now, changing the sheets and organizing the kitchen. And the house is so quiet, it feels so strange. Only 1 hour, everything's changed, it seems so empty. I feel so alone. It was a party that lasted a week and a half. We played music together and we drank and we laughed, and now it's over, 'cause Charlie's gone home. Came here one evening, I wasn't expecting such a happy surprise. With his jokes and his teasing, he had me laughing so hard there were tears in my eyes. And Charlie's got a whole lot of stories to tell. He has an endless supply, and he tells them so well. He's had a wild life. He likes to ramble and to roam. He's been filling my head with the things that he's seen, the scrapes he's got into, and the places he's been. Now they're fading, 'cause Charlie's gone home. When Charlie is with me, my life is on hold. He takes all my time, things get out of control. I should be relieved that I'm finally able to breathe again. Charlie's gone home now. I drove him downtown, dropped him off at the station. I'm sweeping the floors now, changing the sheets and organizing the kitchen. And the house is so quiet, it feels so strange. Only 1 hour, everything's changed, it seems so empty. I feel so alone. It was a party that lasted a week and a half. We played music together and we drank and we laughed, and now it's over, 'cause Charlie's gone home. It's over, Charlie's gone home. It's over. 'Cause Charlie's gone home. Let me know when you're ready.
What a beautiful song. Definitely a wonderful song. Definitely enjoyed that and everything. Like I said, getting ready to get out of here. But one of the things I was going to ask, I asked everybody on these shows, and then I'll play the one that I said I would get to. And I did find that one, which is in Derby's Cathedral. That's the other one that I was going to play as we got out. But I get all my guests on all of these shows to give a message of positivity, a message of hope. You've definitely given several of these during the interview. And if you also want to share how folks can reach you, I know that it looped a couple of times in the videos, the website, but if you want to share your Instagram or Facebook or other means that folks can reach you, then we would greatly appreciate that as well. And like I said, hopefully I'll be able to get you back on again and maybe even have you do some live performances. But I have thoroughly enjoyed our 2 hours of conversation, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a real privilege to be able to talk with you. And yeah, I hope we can do it in person. That would be just amazing. Maybe when I do make it to North Carolina this fall. So my website is sarahmcquaid.com, SarahMcquaid.com. And if you go on the website, then you'll see links there right on the homepage to my YouTube and my Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and Spotify and iTunes and Bandcamp, all of that stuff. It's all there on the website, links to all of that. So that's probably the easiest. And if you just Google Sarah McQuaid, I'm pretty visible. You can get direct links to everything just from there as well. And and there's lots of live performance video on both the website and the YouTube channel. So if you want to see what I'm like in concert before you decide whether to come out and hear one, you can do that. As I mentioned, there's info about my Patreon page as well, where people can just pay a really tiny amount, like $1 a month, and help keep me able to help make it possible for me to keep doing what I do and keep making music, because it is tough. It's a really tough way to make a living. And there's a mailing list as well too that people can sign up to if they want to be kept apprised of when I'm in your part of the world on tour, and what I'm doing and all that stuff. So that's all on the website, sarahmcquaid.com.
Cool. And if there's any message of positivity, because like I said, Pod TV is an international platform, so it's heard in multiple countries around the world. I think the last count, it was like 175, that at least one person or two are listening to it in the various parts. And of course, it is out on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and also on Roku, Amazon Fire, and a number of other sources as well. So they definitely try to make sure to distribute stuff on a regular basis and make sure that people around the world are hearing it. And we do know that whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the war in Ukraine, or there's a number of other things, that people are trying to find positivity in the world, because there is so much negativity that is out there. So we have to find ways to put the positive messages out there also. So definitely, as a friend of mine calls me a light worker, I try to do my part to put positive messages out there and all along those lines. So if you have any message of positivity or hope that you would like to share with our global community, and you'd also like to tell people a little bit about the Old City video, because that's the video that I'll use to get us on out of here. So if you've got any thoughts that you want to share about that particular video, and I do know you said that it was shot in a cathedral as well. And like I said, this place that we're at, the Hayti Heritage Center, is actually a converted church that was built by former slaves and all of that. I want to say back in 1865, and it is still standing tall and has what Branford Marsalis and others, including Megaphone, have said are some of the best acoustics around and all in that space. But definitely, if you would like to share a little bit of positivity and anything that you want to share about the In Derby Cathedral song as well.
So are you using the St. Buryan Sessions version of In Derby Cathedral, or is it the different one?
The St. Buryan Session.
St. Buryan Sessions. Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah. Because that was your viewers will already have seen in Charlie's Gone Home. That was filmed in St. Buryan Church as well, as was the In Derby Cathedral video. As I said, we just filmed the entire album as I was recording it live. So there's 15 songs altogether, all recorded live in that beautiful church, which is just up the road where I live, which is fantastic. But yeah, I feel really hopeful. I think one of the nice things about being a touring musician is you get to go out to so many different places and meet so many different people from all walks of life. And the thing that always strikes me is just the kindness of people. Total strangers will go out of their way to help you and to be kind to you and to do things for you. As a touring musician, a lot of the time when I'm instead of getting put in a hotel, we get put up by hosts, who volunteer to host traveling musicians. They're affiliated to the Art Center or whatever. A lot of people have concerts in their homes, and it's really lovely, I think, that people will do that people will open up their homes and their lives to musicians who they've never met. And so it kind of gives me hope, and it gives me hope. And as I say, as we touched on earlier in this conversation, which has been wonderful, so nice talking to you. Music is a thing that brings people together, and I hope people do continue to appreciate that and to let themselves be put in connection with each other through the medium of music, which is just the loveliest way to do it. Ooh, I've lost your audio, Mark.
Hold on a second. Definitely appreciate it. Definitely look forward to having more conversations with you in the not too distant future. But we're going to get out of here with this last song that is the one that was about the Derby Cathedral and all along those lines. So I know that the listeners are in for another treat because I have thoroughly enjoyed both of these. So we're going to check out the In Derby Cathedral video, the official music video, and then we'll get on out of here on that note. But definitely hope to have you come back again in the not too distant future.
That would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. I hope that happens. Thank you.
No problem. Wrong video, so we'll go with another one while I get the one that I was looking for queued up and all of
Yeah,
that.
I
That
don't
was actually
recognize
from
that
a
video.
friend of mine's tour and all of that. But you can fix that really quick. Then all in that space. That's the great thing about live TV. Is you can always fix things really fast and all along those lines. But somebody had sent me some information about their recent tour to Brazil. I mean, not Brazil, to the promised land of Israel and all in that space. So that was from that particular one, but I'm going to find the one that I was actually looking for and all along those lines because that's how you do the whole juggling thing because we don't mind juggling. Juggling is a fun thing to do and all in those lines. So we're going to get ready to go to the playlist and get to the one that I was looking for and all in that sense. So that's always a thing that can happen in life. Sometimes you just got to do a quick adjustment, and that's what life does all the time and all in that space. What has been one of your, as I'm making this quick adjustments, what has been one of your favorite performances that you've had? Because a lot of times people are always glad to talk about their performances, and I'm sure you had a favorite performance of yours and everything. So what is your favorite performance that you've had the pleasure of doing and all in that line? Because I do know that a lot of times people are always thinking about their most impactful performance. So what is the performance that still resonates with you to this day that you've had as a traveling and international performer?
It's really hard to single out one. I mean, there are a few that kind of stick in my head. one that I always think of as kind of a lovely moment actually was one time I was doing a concert. It was on one of my U.S. tours. It was somewhere in the South. I think it might have been somewhere in Mississippi, possibly, but it was somewhere in the South, and I was about halfway through the concert, and the power went, and so the first thing that happened was, of course, the lights went off, and people went hunting and found candles and put candles all around the stage, and of course. Suddenly the air conditioning wasn't running again, so we had to open all the windows. Otherwise, it would have got really hot really quickly. And so suddenly you could hear all the noises from outside, all the cheeping of the crickets and everything like that. And I finished off the concert without PA, surrounded by candles on the stage, and with all the sounds of the night coming in from outside, all the cheeping crickets and everything like that. And it's one of my favorite memories actually from performing. And it was a moment when things seemed to be going horribly wrong, when the power cut out. And then it turned into this beautiful, magical memory.
It's interesting. Sometimes those performances can be the best when something goes wrong and then you have to make adjustments and all along those lines, or sometimes surprises can happen. I remember when Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis were living, Ruby Dee was actually doing her play One Good Nerve here and everything. And those are legendary actors here in the American Society, both who have passed on and on that spaces. But it was actually that One Good Nerve is a very women empowerment kind of performance that she did, but it was near their anniversary. So Ossie actually snuck here and actually surprised her on their anniversary, because I don't even think she knew he was coming to this space to visit. And I think he brought flowers, and definitely they went out to eat and had a whole anniversary time and everything. But he came here because she was doing a performance that I want to say the sorority that she's part of, which might be the same one that Kamala is part of as well, was the one, or it might have been the Delsons, but one of those sororities was doing the sponsoring the play performance. But I knew, some of the other staff members knew, but a lot of the other folks did not know. So that was one of them cases of a pleasant surprise happening. So that was wonderful. And all along those lines, I know another time when we were doing the Blues Festival at the ballpark, there was actually a moment where Danny Glover and I want to say it was one of the legendary blues singers. I'm trying to remember who it was, but they actually came on stage together. And another time, one of the Blues Brothers snuck into the audience. I think it might have been Jim Belushi, because I think he was doing the whole diet thing. It was either him or Dan Aykroyd, but they came and we had to keep it on the quiet that they were in the audience and everything, but you could hear it on the walkie-talkies. So-and-so's in the audience. Did you know so-and-so's in the audience? But that was one of those kind of cases. I did find the video and got the video queued up correctly. So let's get ready to play this video as we get ready to get on out of here. And like I said, I definitely do look forward to having more conversations with you in the very near future.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on the program.
No problem.
Cathedral, I read through the names on the wall, and I think of them all, I think of them all. Say a prayer for the souls of the faithful departed who've walked through these halls. Say a prayer for them all. Say a prayer for them all. So Darby Cathedral, it's peaceful, but not in my mind. No peace can I find, no peace can I find. So many people in Darby Cathedral, soul, flesh and bone, glass, wood and stone. Ooh, In Darby Cathedral, I read through the names on the wall, and I think of them all. I think of them all. So many people in Darby Cathedral, soul, flesh and bone, glass, wood and stone, soul, flesh and bone, glass, wood and stone. Soul, flesh and bone, glass, wood and stone. Soul, flesh and bone, glass, wood and stone. In Darby Cathedral, I found my last home, my soul free to roam, my name carved in stone. Listen to the bells ringing out for me. In Darby Cathedral, I found my last home. I found my last home. I saw carved in stone. I saw the bells ringing out. Listen to the bells ringing out. In Darby Cathedral, I found my last home. I saw the cathedral. I saw carved in stone. I saw the bells ringing out. Listen to the bells ringing out. Listen to the bells ringing out for me. Hello? What happened?
I was checking that the loop settings weren't ready for that song.
And they were. Fair enough. Right.
What an amazing interview, and we do look forward to having Miss McQuaid back on future shows, and of course we might even be trying to get her some performances here in Durham, North Carolina, or the Triangle area in general. But right now, get ready to go out with a couple of PSAs as we get ready to call it another edition of the video show with Mark Lee, the special edition here on the weekend edition. Usually on Monday afternoons is when the show is. But we also try to make adjustments because of people's schedules, and of course she's over there in London, so kind of 2 o'clock in the afternoon might not have been working all that great since it's probably about like almost nighttime there, and would have been closer to probably midnight if we had done that yesterday and everything. So we definitely try to be respectful of people's times and their needing of rest, because rest is very much important. So we're going to go out with a couple of PSAs, and then we're going to wrap it all up in that space. Ms. McQuaid, if you have any final thoughts, otherwise we're going to get to these PSAs, and then we're going to wrap it up and get on out of here. But I have had a great time talking to you, and hope to see you live and in person at some point, and also see you at a future edition of performances here on Pod TV. And of course, we'll be trying to get some of your performances up as well, because we love giving performances, and we do have an event page as well. So we'll try to look at some of your past performances and put some of those up, maybe even some of the Derby Cathedral stuff that is we got samples of this time, if that's okay with you. So definitely love to do that, and love to make that available for you. That is another place that folks can see your performances, is on the podtv.tv. So we will definitely try to grab some of those and put those on a regular basis on both the live page, which is where this interview is, but also our events page as well.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Mark. It's been really lovely talking to you, and thanks so much. Hope to see you again. Thank you.
Yes, we'll definitely have to do it again. So like I said, we're going to have a couple of these PSAs. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to try to see if I can find the one that dealt with food, because a friend of mine has a food company, and they've got a vegetarian food company that they are. So I think we're going to go out with some food, because I'm already getting hungry, and this will probably just make me hungrier.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements, but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends, so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.
Why would drug dealers put a lethal dose of fentanyl in drugs if they know it's so harmful?
It's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable. Really just all about the money.
Fostering a pet for a friend or neighbor can keep families together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.